The cargo bay of the trading ship Horizon's Edge hummed with activity as the crew prepared for another routine inspection. Tom wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his scanner one more time. The readings looked normal, but something felt wrong about the way the cargo containers were stacked. He had been working on interstellar trading vessels for 3 years now, and his instincts rarely failed him. Crick scuttled across the metal floor on his 6 insect-like legs, his mantis head, turning to examine the container seals. The Threnody alien was one of the best cargo specialists in the fleet, and Tom had grown to respect his careful attention to detail. Behind them, Captain Voss supervised the operation with his cold reptilian eyes, occasionally barking orders. In his gravelly voice, the accident happened without warning. A massive container marked with hazardous material symbols suddenly shifted as its magnetic clamps failed. The 3-ton metal box slammed down with a thunderous crash, and Crick's agonized shriek filled the cargo bay. His lower body was trapped beneath the container, and purple blood began to pool on the floor around him. Tom rushed forward, his medical training taking over. He dropped to his knees beside the injured alien and quickly assessed the situation. Crick's leg was crushed badly, the chitinous exoskeleton cracked and leaking fluid. The alien's breathing was rapid and shallow, his compound eyes wide with pain and fear. "Hold on, Cricks," Tom said, reaching for his medkit. "I'm going to help you." The reaction was immediate and shocking. Every alien in the cargo bay suddenly backed away from Tom as if he had drawn a weapon. Even the injured Cricks began thrashing, weakly, trying to push himself away from the human medic. No, please," Cricks gasped in broken standard. "Not the pain dealer tools. Let me pass with honor." Tom froze, his hand halfway to his medkit. Around him, the alien crew members were pressing themselves against the walls, their faces showing pure terror. Even Captain Voss had taken several steps backward, his scales rippling with distress. "What are you all doing?" Tom demanded. "He says, dying. I need to help him." "Stay back, human," Captain Voss growled, but his voice shook. "Do not bring dishonor to his passing." Tom looked around the cargo bay in disbelief. The other crew members included Nira, a tall blue-skinned Quillari with delicate features, and Brock, a heavily muscled Zorathi whose rocky skin was now pale with fear. All of them were staring at his medkit as if it contained dangerous explosives. "You're all insane," Tom said. "He's bleeding out. If I don't treat him now, he'll die in minutes." "Better to die with dignity than suffer your healing torture," Nira whispered, her voice barely audible. Crick's breathing was getting weaker. Tom could see the life fading from his compound eyes. The purple blood was spreading across the floor, and the alien's movements were becoming more sluggish. Time was running out. "Captain, I'm a medic," Tom said firmly. "I took an oath to help the injured." "I won't let him die just because you're afraid of my equipment?" Captain Voss looked torn between his fear and his duty as a ship's captain. His long tail lashed back and forth as he struggled with the decision. Finally, as Crick's breathing became barely detectable, he gave a reluctant nod. "Do what you must, human," he said. "But know that we will remember this violation." Tom ignored the strange comment and quickly opened his medkit. He pulled out a tourniquet and emergency medical scanner, working with practiced efficiency. The other crew members watched in horrified fascination as he began treating their colleague. First, Tom applied the tourniquet above the injury to stop the bleeding. Crick screamed as the device tightened, but Tom held him down gently. Next, he used his scanner to assess the internal damage. The readings showed severe trauma to the leg, but nothing that couldn't be repaired with proper treatment. "I'm going to give you something for the pain," Tom said, preparing an injection. "This will help." Crick's eyes went wide with terror. "No, please, no poisoning, no burning medicines." "It's not poison," Tom explained patiently. "It's a painkiller. It will make you feel better." The injection worked quickly. Crick's breathing steadied as the pain medication took effect. Tom then began using his portable bone fusion device, a piece of standard medical equipment that could repair fractures and strengthen damaged bone. The device hummed as it worked, sending energy pulses through the injured limb. The alien crew watched in stunned silence as their colleague began to show signs of improvement. The bleeding had stopped, the worst of the pain was gone, and the bone fusion device was already beginning to repair the damage. What had seemed like a fatal injury was becoming manageable. "How is this possible?" Nira asked in a whisper. "It's just basic emergency medicine," Tom replied, still focused on his patient. "Nothing special about it." Within an hour, Crix was sitting up and moving his leg carefully. The bone fusion device had done its work, and the emergency treatment had stabilized all his vital signs. Tom applied a protective bandage and gave him some additional medication to prevent infection. "You can walk on it in a few hours," Tom said. "Take it easy for a few days, but you should be fine." Crix stared at his leg in amazement. He moved it experimentally, testing the strength of the repair. The pain was gone, replaced by a dull ache. That was easily manageable. He looked up at Tom with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "You made me live," he said simply, "even when I'd beg for honor and death." Tom packed up his medkit, still confused by the crew's reaction. "That's what medics do, Crix. We help people get better." The alien crew members were still keeping their distance, but their terror had been replaced by something else. They looked at Tom with a mixture of awe and fear, as if he had performed some kind of dark magic. Even Captain Voss seemed shaken by what he had witnessed. "The stories are true," Brock rumbled in his deep voice. "Humans really do force life back into the dying." Tom looked around at their faces, trying to understand what was happening. He had just saved a crew member's life, something that should have been celebrated. Instead, he felt like he had committed some terrible crime. "I don't understand," he said. "What stories?" But none of the aliens would answer. They helped Crix to his feet and escorted him to the medical bay for observation. Tom was left alone in the cargo bay, surrounded by the tools of his trade and wondering what he had done wrong. Tom spent the next several days trying to understand what had happened in the cargo bay. The alien crew members avoided him whenever possible, and when they did speak to him, their voices carried an odd mixture of respect and fear. Even Crix, who should have been grateful for the life-saving treatment, seemed uncomfortable around him, unable to sleep. Tom made his way to the ship's database terminal in the middle of the night shift. He began searching for information about human medical practices and their reputation among alien species. What he found made his blood run cold. The first document he opened was a Quillari medical journal with the title "The Horror of Human Healing." Methods. The article described human medics as beings who violated the natural order of death and dying through barbaric interventions. Tom read on, his confusion growing with each paragraph. According to the article, humans were known throughout the galaxy for their refusal to accept death. While most alien species viewed serious injury or illness as a sign that it was time to pass peacefully into the next existence, humans fought against death with what the writer called savage determination. The journal described human surgical procedures in terms that made them sound like torture. The practice of cutting open a living being to repair internal damage was viewed as a form of ritual mutilation. The use of electric shocks to restart a stopped heart was described as forcing unwilling spirits back into dying flesh. Even simple procedures like setting broken bones were seen as prolonging suffering through artificial means. Tom opened another document, this one from the Zorathi Cultural Archives. The title translated to "Those Who Deny the Peace of Death." The article was even more disturbing than the first. It described human medics as beings who trap souls in broken bodies and force the dying to endure endless pain for their own dark purposes. The Zorathi had a word for human medics that roughly translated to pain dealers. According to their cultural beliefs, suffering was meant to purify the soul before death. By eliminating that suffering through medical intervention, humans were preventing their patients from achieving spiritual peace. A third document from the Drakmari Military Archives was titled "Human Medical Warfare Tactics." Tom nearly laughed at the absurdity of it, but the content was serious. The report described how human medics would torture enemy prisoners back to health so they could be interrogated again. The practice of treating wounded enemies instead of allowing them to die honorably was seen as a form of psychological warfare. The more Tom read, the more he understood the alien crew's reaction. From their perspective, his medkit wasn't a tool for healing. It was an instrument of torture, designed to force life into beings who were ready to die. His training as a medic, something he had always been proud of, was viewed as a form of dark magic or cruel science. He found personal accounts from aliens who had been treated by human medics. A Threnody merchant described being held captive in agony while a human doctor repaired his damaged organs. A Quillari explorer wrote about being poisoned with burning chemicals during chemotherapy treatment for cancer. A Zorathi soldier recounted being electrocuted back to life after his heart stopped during surgery. All of these accounts described the same pattern. The aliens had been ready to die peacefully, accepting their fate with dignity. Then, human medics had intervened, forcing them to endure pain and suffering in order to continue living. The fact that the treatments worked and the patients survived only made the stories more frightening to other aliens. Tom began to understand that this wasn't just about medical procedures. It represented a fundamental difference in philosophy between humans and most other species. Where humans saw death as an enemy to be fought, aliens saw it as a natural transition to be accepted. Where humans found hope in struggle, aliens found peace in surrender. He discovered that most alien medical practices focused on comfort rather than cure. When a Quillari became seriously ill, their healers would provide pain relief and spiritual guidance to help them pass peacefully. Threnody medicine emphasized accepting injury as part of life's natural cycle. Zorathi healers concentrated on helping their patients find meaning in their suffering rather than trying to eliminate it. The concept of aggressive medical intervention was foreign to most alien cultures. The idea of cutting someone open to save their life seemed as barbaric to them as ritual sacrifice seemed to humans. The use of machines to keep someone alive when their body was failing was viewed as a form of technological necromancy. Tom found recordings of conversations between alien doctors discussing human medical practices. They spoke in hushed tones about human resurrection chambers that could bring the dead back to life. They described human medics as beings who had conquered death itself through their willingness to inflict suffering on their patients. One particularly disturbing recording was from a Drakmari medical conference where speakers debated whether human healing methods should be classified as torture. The debate was serious and lengthy, with participants citing examples of humans who had forced healing on unwilling alien patients. The final consensus was that while the results were undeniably effective, the methods were ethically questionable. At best, Tom closed the database and sat in the darkness of his quarters, trying to process what he had learned. His entire career had been built on helping others, on fighting to save lives when others might give up. Now he discovered that this dedication was seen as cruelty by the very people he was trying to help. He thought about Crix lying in the cargo bay, begging to be allowed to die with honor. From the alien's perspective, Tom hadn't saved his life. He had condemned him to continued existence in a damaged body, denying him the peaceful death he had been prepared to accept. The next morning, Tom found Crix in the recreation area, walking normally on his repaired leg. The Threnody was playing a game with some of the other crew members, his movements showing no sign of his recent injury. When he saw Tom approaching, he stopped and gave a respectful nod. "How are you feeling?" Tom asked. "Strong," Crix replied. "The pain is gone. The leg works as it did before." Tom noticed that the other aliens had stopped their activities to watch the conversation. They seemed curious about what the human medic and his patient would say to each other. "Are you angry with me?" Tom asked. "For treating you against your wishes?" Crix considered the question carefully. "Angry is not the right word," he said finally. "Confused, perhaps. In my culture, we believe that serious injury is a sign that it is time to join our ancestors. You prevented that joining." "But you're alive," Tom pointed out. "You can still be with your family, still work, still experience life." "Yes," Crix agreed. "But I was ready to leave those things behind. You made me want them again." Tom began to understand that the alien fear of human medicine went deeper than just the procedures themselves. It was about the human refusal to accept defeat, the insistence on fighting even when the odds seemed impossible. This determination was both admirable and terrifying to species that had learned to find peace in acceptance. 3 weeks later, the Horizon's Edge was on a routine trading mission to the outer colonies when they received an emergency distress signal. The message was weak and broken, coming from somewhere in the Helleny sector. Captain Voss ordered the ship to change course and investigate. The source of the signal was a massive colony ship called the Peaceful Journey, carrying 20,000 Helleny refugees from their war-torn homeworld. The ship was drifting in space, its engines cold and its communication systems barely functional. When Captain Voss made contact, the response was heartbreaking. "We are dying," came the weak voice of the Helleny ship's captain. "The sickness has taken most of our people. We have accepted our fate, but wanted to send word to our families before we join the eternal rest." Tom listened to the transmission with growing horror. The Helleny were a peaceful species, known for their spiritual nature and their beautiful music. They had been fleeing from a civil war that had destroyed their planet, seeking a new home among the stars. Now they were facing extinction from some kind of plague. "How many are affected?" Captain Voss asked. "All of us," the Helleny captain replied. "The sickness spreads through the air we breathe. Our healers say it is a sign that we were meant to die with our world. We have stopped fighting it." Tom stepped forward to the communication console. "This is Tom, the ship's medic. Can you describe the symptoms?" There was a long pause before the Helleny captain answered. "Fever, difficulty breathing, weakness that grows worse each day. Our children are the first to be taken. We have prepared them for their final journey with songs and blessings." Tom felt a chill run through him. The symptoms sounded like a respiratory infection, possibly bacterial. With proper treatment, it could be cured. But he also knew that the Helleny, like most alien species, would not welcome aggressive medical intervention. "We're coming aboard," Tom announced. "I can help your people." The alien crew of the Horizon's Edge immediately began protesting. Captain Voss turned to face Tom, his reptilian features twisted with concern. "You cannot board that ship," Voss said. "The sickness will spread to us." "I have protective equipment," Tom replied. "And even if I didn't, I can't just let 20,000 people die from something that might be treatable." Neera stepped forward, her blue skin pale with fear. "You heard what their captain said. They have accepted their fate. It is not your place to deny them their chosen death." "They're not choosing death," Tom argued. "They're dying because they don't know how to fight the disease. There's a difference." The argument continued for several minutes, but Tom's mind was already made up. He began preparing his equipment, loading his medkit with broad-spectrum antibiotics, 4 fluids, and portable life support devices. The alien crew watched him with the same mixture of fear and fascination they had shown after treating Crix. "I'm going alone," Tom announced. "I won't ask any of you to come with me." To his surprise, Crix stepped forward. "I will come," the Threnody said quietly. The other crew members stared at him in shock. Even Tom was surprised by the offer. "You don't have to do this," Tom said. "It's dangerous, and your people won't understand." "You forced me to live when I was ready to die," Crix replied. "Perhaps it is time for me to help others make the same choice." Tom and Crix prepared for the boarding operation while the rest of the crew watched in horrified silence. Tom sealed himself into a full environmental suit, complete with its own air supply and medical monitoring systems. Crix wore a modified version, designed for his insect-like physiology. The docking procedure was complicated by the fact that the Helleny ship's systems were failing. Emergency power was the only thing keeping life support functional, and even that was weakening. Tom and Crix had to manually override the airlock controls to get inside. The scene that greeted them was devastating. The corridors of the Peaceful Journey were filled with sick and dying Helleny. The aliens lay on makeshift beds, their normally golden skin turned pale and sickly. Their musical voices, usually raised in harmonious song, were reduced to weak whispers. And labored breathing, Helleny children were scattered throughout the ship, some already dead, others barely clinging to life. The adult Helleny sat beside them, singing soft funeral songs and preparing them for what they believed was their final journey. The entire ship felt like a floating tomb. Tom knelt beside the first patient he encountered, a young Hellene child, whose breathing was extremely labored. He began scanning the child with his medical equipment, trying to determine the exact nature of the illness. The readings confirmed his suspicions about a bacterial respiratory infection. "I can help her," Tom said, preparing an injection of antibiotics. The child's parent, a tall Hellene with intricate tattoos covering his arms, gently pushed Tom away. "Please do not prolong her suffering," he said. "She is ready to join the song of the ancestors." "She's not suffering," Tom insisted. "She's sick. I can make her better." The parent looked at Tom with sad, understanding eyes. To force her to remain in this broken body would be cruel. Let her pass in peace. Tom felt the same frustration he had experienced with Cricks. These people were choosing death over treatment, viewing their illness as a spiritual calling rather than a medical problem. But unlike Cricks, who had been unconscious during his treatment, these patients were awake and actively refusing help. Cricks approached from another corridor, his scanner in hand. "The sickness is everywhere," he reported. "Every living being on this ship is infected." "Then we treat everyone," Tom said firmly, "starting with the children." "They will not accept treatment," Cricks pointed out. "Their culture demands peaceful acceptance of death." "Then we'll have to convince them otherwise," Tom replied. "We'll start with the ones who are too sick to refuse." Tom and Cricks began moving through the ship, identifying the patients who were closest to death. Tom reasoned that if he could save the most critical cases, the others might be willing to accept treatment. It was a desperate plan, but it was the only one he could think of. The first patient was an elderly Hellene who had fallen into a coma. Tom began 4 fluids and antibiotics, working quickly to stabilize the alien's condition. The patient's family gathered around, singing death songs and preparing for the final farewell. They watched in confusion as Tom connected monitoring equipment and began aggressive treatment. "What are you doing to our father?" one of the family members asked. "I'm fighting the infection," Tom replied. "If I can get his fever down and clear his lungs, he might recover." But he has already begun the journey to join our ancestors," the family member protested. "To pull him back now would be cruel." Tom ignored the protests and continued working. Within hours, the elderly Hellene's condition began to improve. His fever broke, his breathing became easier, and his vital signs stabilized. By the next day, he was conscious and talking. Word of the recovery spread through the ship like wildfire. The other Hellene couldn't believe that their elder had been pulled back from the edge of death. Some viewed it as a miracle, others as an abomination. But for the first time since the plague began, there was hope aboard the peaceful journey. News of the plague ship spread through the galaxy faster than Tom had expected. Within days, other human vessels were changing course to assist the peaceful journey. The first to arrive was a medical transport called the Mercy's Hand, carrying a full team of human doctors and enough supplies to treat thousands of patients. Dr. Lisa Park, the lead physician on the medical transport, was a veteran of interspecies medicine. She had worked with alien populations for over a decade and understood the cultural challenges they faced. When she met Tom in the makeshift medical bay they had set up aboard the Hellene ship, her expression was both impressed and concerned. 20,000 patients with respiratory plague, she said, reviewing Tom's initial reports. "And they're all refusing treatment." "Not all of them," Tom corrected. "We've managed to treat about 50 of the most critical cases. Word is spreading that recovery is possible." Dr. Park nodded, but Tom could see the worry in her eyes. "The problem isn't medical," she said. "It's cultural. The Hellene believe that suffering purifies the soul before death. By treating them, we're interfering with their spiritual journey." Tom had learned this firsthand over the past few days. The Hellene who had recovered were struggling with complex emotions. They were grateful to be alive, but they also felt that they had been denied something important. Some spoke of feeling spiritually incomplete because they had not experienced the full journey of illness and death. "We can't just let them die," Tom said. "Not when we know we can save them." "I agree," Dr. Park replied. But we need to find a way to make treatment culturally acceptable. Otherwise, we're just imposing our values on them. The solution came from an unexpected source. Elder Thrain, the elderly Helene who had been Tom's first successful patient, requested a meeting with the human medical team. He had been observing the treatment process and had reached some conclusions of his own. "I have been thinking about what happened to me," Elder Thrain said, his voice still weak but determined. "I was ready to join the song of the ancestors, but the human healer pulled me back. At first I was angry, then I was confused. Now I believe. I understand." Tom and Dr. Park listened carefully as the elder continued. "Perhaps the song of the ancestors is not just about death," Elder Thrain said. "Perhaps it is about the choice to live when living becomes difficult. Perhaps fighting the sickness is another form of purification." This was a revolutionary idea. Among the Helene, their traditional beliefs had always emphasized accepting hardship as a path to spiritual growth. But Elder Thrain was suggesting that fighting against death might be equally valid spiritually. "The human healers do not eliminate suffering," the elder continued. "They transform it. The pain of illness becomes the pain of healing. The struggle with death becomes the struggle for life. Both require courage. Both require faith." Word of Elder Thrain's revelation spread through the ship. The Helene began to discuss the possibility that accepting treatment was not a rejection of their spiritual beliefs, but a different interpretation of them. Some began to volunteer for treatment, curious about this new form of spiritual challenge. Meanwhile, more human medical ships were arriving. The fleet now included the research vessel Scientific Progress, the hospital ship Healing Light, and several smaller medical transports. The humans had turned the rescue operation into a massive, collaborative effort. Dr. Chung from the Scientific Progress was particularly interested in the cultural aspects of the situation. He had spent years studying how different species approached death and dying. He worked with Elder Thrain to develop a new framework for understanding human medical intervention. "What if we present treatment as a test of spiritual strength?" Dr. Chin suggested. Instead of avoiding suffering, patients would be choosing to endure a different kind of suffering in order to continue their spiritual journey. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. Rather than abandoning their beliefs, the Helene could incorporate human medical treatment into their existing spiritual framework. The pain of treatment became a form of meditation. The struggle to recover became a test of faith. Elder Thrain began teaching other Helene about this new perspective. He described his own treatment as a spiritual awakening, a journey through pain and back to life that had given him new understanding of his purpose. Other recovered patients began sharing similar stories. The children were the first to fully embrace the new approach. Young Helene, who had been saved by human medicine, spoke of feeling chosen for continued life. They began to see their recovery as a sign that they had important work to do in the world. Parents, who had initially refused treatment for their children, began to change their minds. The idea that their offspring might be destined for special purposes made the pain of medical intervention acceptable. Soon, the medical teams were treating hundreds of patients daily. Tom found himself working alongside Helene healers who were learning human medical techniques. They were fascinated by the aggressive approach to fighting disease, viewing it as a form of spiritual warfare. The combination of human medical knowledge and Helene's spiritual wisdom created a new form of healing. "We fight the sickness not because we fear death," one Helene healer explained to Tom, "but because we honor life. The ancestors sing not just of peaceful endings, but of courageous beginnings." The transformation was remarkable. The peaceful journey, which had been a ship of the dying, became a center of learning and healing. Helene from other ships in the refugee fleet began asking for passage, so they could learn about the new medical spiritual practices. Dr. Park was amazed by the change. "I've never seen anything like this," she told Tom. "We're not just treating a disease, we're helping an entire culture evolve." But the most significant change was in how the Helene viewed humans. Where once they had seen humans as beings who denied the natural order of death, They now saw them as teachers who offered a different path to spiritual growth. The fear and revulsion that had characterized most alien reactions to human medicine was replaced by curiosity and respect. "Your people do not conquer death," Elder Thrain explained to Tom. "You dance with it. You make it work for life instead of against it. This is a wisdom we had not considered." Tom realized that something fundamental had changed, not just for the Helene, but for human-alien relations throughout the galaxy. The plague ship had become a symbol of cooperation between species with very different approaches to life and death. As the weeks passed, the peaceful journey became completely free of the plague. The Helene who had recovered were stronger than before, both physically and spiritually. They had learned that there were many ways to honor life and death, and that the human approach was not cruel but simply different. The story of the plague ship began to spread to other alien civilizations. For the first time, humans were being viewed not as barbaric pain dealers but as dedicated healers who refused to give up on their patients. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with a growing respect for human determination and compassion. 6 months after the plague ship incident, Tom stood in the medical bay of the Galactic Commerce Guild's newest hospital ship, the Bridge of Hope. He wore the insignia of Chief Medical Officer, a position he had never imagined he would hold. The ship was a marvel of engineering. Designed specifically for interspecies medical care, the medical bay was unlike anything that had existed before. Human medical equipment stood alongside alien healing chambers. Helene's spiritual advisors worked next to Threnody pain specialists. Quillari comfort care experts collaborated with human trauma surgeons. It was a place where different approaches to medicine and healing could coexist and learn from each other. Tom's first patient of the day was a young Drakmari who had been injured in a mining accident. The alien's arm was badly broken, and his reptilian features were tight with pain. What would have been a simple case months ago was now a complex cultural negotiation. "I wish to pass with honor," the Drakmari said, his voice steady despite his obvious suffering. "My ancestors called to me." Tom knelt beside the patient, his medkit within easy reach. But instead of immediately beginning treatment, he paused to consider the alien's cultural background. The Drakmari valued strength and honor above all else. Simply forcing treatment on him would be counterproductive. "I understand your wish for honor," Tom said carefully. "But consider this, is there not honor in overcoming pain? In fighting through injury to continue serving your people?" The Drakmari's eyes narrowed as he considered the question. "You speak of fighting the injury rather than accepting it." "I speak of choosing your path," Tom replied. "Death is one choice. Healing is another. Both require courage." This was the new approach that had evolved from the plague ship incident. Instead of simply imposing human medical values on alien patients, the medical teams had learned to present treatment as a choice between different forms of courage. It was a subtle but important distinction. The Drakmari thought for a long moment, then nodded. "I choose to fight. Heal me, human." Tom began treatment using both human medical technology and techniques he had learned from alien healers. The bone regeneration process was painful, but the Drakmari endured it with the stoic determination of his species. When the treatment was complete, the alien flexed his restored arm with satisfaction. "You have given me a victory over injury," the Drakmari said. "I will tell my clan that human healers are warriors who fight death itself." Tom smiled as he cleaned his equipment. The change in alien attitudes toward human medicine had been gradual but profound. Where once they had feared human medics as pain dealers, many now sought them out as specialists in fighting seemingly hopeless cases. Crix entered the medical bay, carrying a datapad with the day's assignments. The Threnody had become Tom's assistant and had proven to be an excellent bridge between human and alien medical practices. His experience with both perspectives made him invaluable in treating mixed-species crews. "The Quillari transport needs assistance," Crix reported. "They have a patient with organ failure. Their healers are providing comfort care, but the family is requesting human intervention." Tom nodded, gathering his equipment. Organ failure cases were among the most challenging from a cultural standpoint. Most alien species viewed it as a clear sign that death was approaching and should be accepted peacefully. The fact that a Quillari family was requesting human treatment showed how much attitudes had changed. They took a shuttle to the Quillari transport, a beautiful ship with flowing lines and soft lighting. The patient was an elderly Quillari artist whose liver had been damaged by a rare toxin. Under normal circumstances, his people would have prepared him for a peaceful death surrounded by music and art. Instead, Tom found the patient connected to a life support system. His family gathered around him with expressions of hope rather than resignation. The eldest family member, a distinguished Quillari with silver hair, approached Tom with deep respect. "We have heard of your reputation," the elder said. "You are known as one who refuses to accept defeat. We wish to learn if our father can be saved." Tom examined the patient carefully. The liver damage was severe, but not beyond the capabilities of human regenerative medicine. However, the treatment would be long and painful, requiring multiple procedures and weeks of recovery. "I can help him," Tom said finally, "but the treatment will be difficult. He will suffer considerably during the healing process." The family exchanged glances, clearly struggling with the decision. In their culture, causing suffering to a loved one was considered deeply wrong. But they had also heard stories of miraculous recoveries achieved through human medicine. "We have spoken with the Hellene survivors," the elder said. "They tell us that suffering can be transformed into growth. We are willing to try this path." The treatment took 3 weeks. Tom worked with a team of human doctors and alien healers, combining advanced medical technology with traditional comfort care. The patient endured multiple procedures, each one painful but necessary for his recovery. Throughout the process, the Quillari family provided support in their traditional way through music and art. They sang healing songs during the medical procedures, turning the sterile treatment room into a space of beauty and hope. The combination of human medical intervention and Quillari spiritual support created something entirely new. When the patient finally recovered, he was not just healed but transformed. He spoke of his experience as a journey through darkness into light, a spiritual awakening that had given him new understanding of life and death. His recovery became a symbol of cooperation between human and alien approaches to healing. News of the successful treatment spread through the Quillari cultural network. Other Quillari began seeking out human medical treatment, not as a rejection of their own beliefs, but as an expansion of them. The idea that suffering could be purposeful and transformative was becoming accepted among species that had previously viewed it as something to be avoided. Tom returned to the Bridge of Hope to find that his reputation had grown even further. Alien medical students from across the galaxy were requesting placement on his ship. They wanted to learn the human approach to medicine, not to replace their own traditions, but to add new tools to their healing arsenal. The training program that evolved was unlike anything in galactic history. Human doctors learned alien techniques for spiritual healing and comfort care. Alien healers learned human methods for aggressive intervention and life support. The exchange of knowledge created new hybrid approaches that were more effective than either tradition alone. Dr. Park, who had become Tom's deputy, was amazed by the transformation. "We're not just treating patients anymore," she observed. "We're teaching entire civilizations that there are multiple ways to honor life and death." The most significant change was in the broader galactic community. The old fear of human medicine was being replaced by respect and curiosity. Alien governments began establishing medical exchange programs with human institutions. The idea that humans were cruel pain dealers was becoming a relic of the past. Tom often thought about the moment in the cargo bay when he had first pulled out his medkit and watched the alien crew flee in terror. That fear had been based on misunderstanding, on the assumption that human medical practices were motivated by cruelty rather than compassion. The truth was more complex. Humans did refuse to accept death when it could be prevented. They did inflict pain in the process of healing. They did force patients to endure suffering in order to recover. But these actions were motivated by love, not cruelty. They came from a fundamental belief that life was worth fighting for. Even when the fight was difficult, the aliens had learned that human medicine was not about conquering death, but about dancing with it. It was about choosing to struggle rather than surrender, to fight rather than accept defeat. It was about believing that every life had value and that no one should die alone or without hope. As Tom prepared for his next shift, he reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy was still a dangerous place and death was still an inevitable part of life. But now, when disaster struck and lives hung in the balance, alien crews no longer ran in fear when a human pulled out a medkit. Instead, they ran toward the human medics, knowing that where others saw hopeless cases, humans saw patients worth saving. They had learned that when death came calling, humans would answer back with determination, skill, and an unshakable belief that every life was worth fighting for. The medkit was no longer a symbol of fear, but of hope. It represented the human refusal to give up, the determination to fight against impossible odds, and the belief that tomorrow could be better than today. In a galaxy where most species had learned to accept defeat, humans offered something different, the courage to keep trying when everyone else had given up. And that, Tom realized, was why the galaxy needed human medicine, not because it was superior to alien healing traditions, but because it offered an alternative. It provided hope where others saw only despair, possibility where others saw only endings. It reminded everyone that the choice between life and death was not always as simple as it seemed.